Hello, everyone. Meet Carto'graph. The, well, one of the larger, at least, YouTubers I've found that, would like to present to us an argument in favor of pedophilia. Let's just, let's get into this, shall we?
Hello, my name is Carto'graph, and I am a minor attracted person.
Hi, Carto'graph. You're insane.
I'm here to provide information regarding minor attraction, answer questions, counter arguments, and try to provide a place for people to come and discuss a taboo and oftentimes difficult topic.
I would love to discuss that with you, Carto'graph.
Before I get into the meat of this topic, I'd like to point out that I am not a philosopher, and my reading on the topic has mostly confused me. What follows is therefore quite possibly insane. I don't know if it makes sense or not, but it's based on logic and reason to the best of my ability. With that said, today...
I don't know if it makes sense or not, but it's based on logic and reason. You know, I should probably stop making fun of him. I'm here to actually talk about his points. Let's just keep going.
Today I'll be discussing, is minor attraction wrong? The heart of the issue. Naturally, being minor attracted myself, I don't think it's wrong. That's a given. However, I think it's pertinent to explain why I don't think it's wrong, from a few different angles, as well as why I think it's considered so by most of society.
Oh, I really hope you've got some good arguments.
First of all, it's natural. This really has little to do with morality, but it's important to say. Otherwise, I might get people arguing that it being unnatural is somehow proof of its immorality. I have done a video giving evidence for this claim, and briefly explaining why it makes no sense. Here's an annotation. Both good and bad things are natural. Mangoes and bunnies are natural. Rot and pneumono-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis are natural.
If you understand that the naturalist argument has no water, why are we even discussing this? You know that the people that make that argument, they believe it on an ideological level very often. This is pointless, but let's keep going anyway.
Birth and death are natural. There is nothing inherently good about being natural. And yet, it seems like a convincing argument on the surface. Why? I'm not sure, but I have an idea. Ignorance. No, not ignorance of whatever is being argued for or against, though sometimes that too. No, I mean humankind's ignorance of nature. When we fuck with the natural order, whatever that may be, we have the potential to cause a lot of damage. Science has a sordid history with this. For example, the use of thalidomide to treat morning sickness. By not understanding how thalidomide affected fetal development, over 10,000 children were born with malformed limbs.
This is the first point I'd like to make. This is an example of conflating something that is true with conflating something that is related. Science does get things wrong. Lobotomies are a perfect example of that. Even mainstream medical and scientific knowledge isn't always correct. The consensus is actually often in science, at least partially incorrect as more evidence comes out. This doesn't mean you get to fuck kids. Let's let him keep arguing.
With less than half surviving. Of course, it was also through science that we learned how this happens, so we won't repeat our mistakes. But if being unnatural isn't a good reason to believe minor attraction is wrong, why do I bring it up? It's because I think it highlights an aspect of morality, or rather immorality. Harm, or the perception thereof. Humans are social creatures with a strong sense of empathy. We understand that most people experience the world in much the same way, and barring interesting psychological conditions.
Speaking of psychological conditions, I have a distinct hunch that you and me don't experience the world the same way. Just a thought, a hunch, an assumption, if you will.
We don't want ourselves or others hurt. It's part of our makeup, and it develops in an early age. Hurting others becomes taboo. Nobody likes a person who hurts or threatens others, unless it's done in fun for both people.
Okay, what planet have you been living on? People enjoy seeing other people getting hurt all the time. You ever heard of World Star? You ever heard of MMA boxing? I mean, you could say that they're both consenting to it, but that doesn't change the fact that everyone in the audience is enjoying watching two people kick the crap out of each other. Kick the ever-living shit out of each other. Something tells me the guy face down in his own blood isn't enjoying it, and yet the crowd is. Humans enjoy hurting each other. We're a violent species. This is stupid. Please move on to the next point.
Or to prevent further harm to others. Another reason I note that minor attraction is natural is to point out that it's not a mental disorder. Google is mostly unhelpful regarding mental illness, defining it as a condition which causes serious disorder in a person's behavior or thinking. What sort of criteria are used to determine if a condition is a mental disorder, or if it is a different, healthy mental state? I don't know, but based on my limited knowledge, it seems to take into account harm and objective reality.
Carto'graph, if you don't understand what does and doesn't constitute a mental disorder, you probably shouldn't bring them up. Because generally, whenever we're talking about any sort of sexuality that goes off the rails or is influenced by what you might call trauma, such as pedophilia, seeing as, I mean, if you want to talk about science, where 73% of children that were, whether consensually or not, and we'll get into that later, but whether consensually or not, 73% of children that were engaged in sexual activities at a young age self-reported as having pedophilic tendencies. So that would tend to, well, first of all, it suggests that the actual number's higher, right? The actual number is probably higher than that. Second of all, that would suggest that this does constitute some sort of life-altering event, which you could call trauma. But let's keep going.
If you have a mental condition that harms yourself or others, or makes you wish to, it's probably an illness. There are exceptions, such as enjoying tattoos, which has occurred for time immemorial, and technically makes you want to hurt yourself and leave a permanent icon of that pain, but it's considered healthy, and even admired. If you have a mental condition that makes you think reality is different to objective reality, then you probably have a mental illness. This is less clear-cut than it initially seems. Systems of belief vary greatly, and at what point is it considered illness? A majority of people believe in some sort of higher power which can't be proven objectively, but they aren't mentally ill. A majority of people believe that women have been oppressed throughout history, but that just contradicts the facts, and yet they aren't insane either.
It's interesting to me that this man clearly, even though I'm making fun of him, he doesn't appear to be stupid. I really would like to know what happened to this man earlier in his life that he came to defending this, because he actually does seem to have a train of logic to follow, even if I find his conclusion ludicrous. Like, you can have a good train of logic while getting the conclusion totally wrong. So wrong. But it kind of makes me sad that someone that clearly is at least reasonably intelligent ended up like this. Back to making fun of him.
But the guy who thinks the government is stealing his thoughts through his feelings most definitely is. The difference I see in these examples is that the first two aren't inherently dangerous, while the last one is.
Kind of like fucking children.
Considering the current ideas about children, it's no wonder that minor attraction is considered a mental illness. Most people think children are innocent of all sexuality, and that sex is somehow damaging. Honestly, I think that idea is more damaging than minor attraction.
it's not that children are completely devoid of sexuality. Every child is going to experience sexuality, sexual maturity, sexual whatever at a different rate, and with varying levels of interest, shall we say. There are some children, as notated on in this man's video's comments, actually, that start masturbating at a very young age. That doesn't mean it's your place to decide that. Children should be free to explore their sexuality away from adults. Far away from adults. Two 11-year-olds going at it, to me, is a very different situation from a 40-year-old, like Carto'graph, going at it with the same 11-year-old. It's a different situation. Yeah.
Educated minor attracted people understand that children are not asexual and tend to realize the negative effects of sexual suppression children suffer.
What? Negative effects of sexual suppression. Oh, please. Oh, please tell me what the negative effects of not fucking children are.
It's hard to be harmful when you're looking out for the best interest of another, while everyone else is watching to see if you fuck up. As evidence for the harm caused by childhood sexual suppression, a 1981 study on the immediate and long-term effects of childhood sexual experiences had this to say. Of particular interest are the two cells in Table 17.4, representing the best case and worst case conditions. The worst case situation, characterized by high anxiety and high guilt, is that of the passive consenter, who is aware of the moral negatives but ignorant of sex. This is the typical American child, told that sex is bad but not what it is, and taught to be compliant and obedient with adults and older siblings, and not to tattle.
The reason we make children feel like sex in general isn't a good thing is to prevent them from engaging in it. Because sex does have negative consequences in general. STIs, pregnancy, just general stress that comes with engaging in sex that children don't need to worry about. They've got other problems. Just saying.
The best case situation is that of the active cooperator, who knows about sex but has not absorbed the conventional moral negatives. This suggests the best course of action in reducing the negative effects of childhood sexual experience is to educate children about sex.
No, hold on. Let's go back to that table real quick. Let's just... There we go. The only situation where this applies, because you'd have to ensure that a child ends up in the sexually knowledgeable but not aware of taboos category. Because again, the important thing here, because he's basically stating that sexually knowledgeable children and going down the consensual category produce low anxiety and low guilt, which I'll question that, but let's just say it's true. How do you ensure that a child gets to that category? That's called grooming. Because you'd have to make sure that they both consent and are sexually knowledgeable to ensure that outcome. So you would have to intentionally teach a child about sex, what it is, what to expect, and then convince them to engage in it with you. You're manipulating a child into sucking your dick. Manipulating anyone into sex is disgusting. Manipulating a child into sex is abhorrent. What are you... Okay, a little angry. Let's just... Where was I? Let me bring this back.
About sex, and not have such action considered immoral. If it was
Man, I got back to the right. I just clicked on that. I got back to the right place real quick. Go me.
Wasn't immoral in society, they wouldn't need to remain ignorant of its moral standing to keep from feeling guilty.
Are you suggesting we just don't teach children about the negative consequences of sex? For what purpose? So that you can justify sticking your dick in them? There are negative consequences to sex. Now, I'm not like a prude or a sex-negative person in any way. But there are negative consequences. Just, you can't...
Wait a second. If my definition of mental illness is accurate, and antis deny the reality of child sexuality, which leads to psychological harm, does that mean being an anti is literally insane?
Really? Really? Oh yeah, it's the entire world that's insane, not you. Yeah, it's everyone else that's insane. Remember the guy with the tinfoil hat? Wake up, sheeple. Fucking children's great. Okay, yeah.
Might explain a few comments. Anyway, I've already suggested that the root cause behind minor attraction being considered immoral is the potential harm to M.A.Ps or the children they love. I've also said that it's not...
Excuse me, potential harm to M.A.Ps? Also, if you're a true pedophile, and you're presumably, exclusively, attracted to children, what exactly happens? Like, I'm genuinely curious about this and how this dynamic works. And if you want to give me a response, I'll be happy to engage in that with you. What happens when they're no longer children? Because every M.A.P, or minor attracted person, has an age range that they're interested in. Since you use the word pedophile in one of your annotations on whether or not pedophilia is wrong, which you couldn't see here because I downloaded this video. Sorry about that. What exactly... What's your age range, I wonder? And what happens when they go outside of that age range? What happens when they do hit puberty? Do you just get rid of them? Do you dump them? Do you move on to a new kid? Because presumably, while the 6-year-old might get your dick hard, what about a 13-year-old? Because most adults can stay together even as they get older through a lack of not necessarily a lack of sexual attraction, but obviously your grandpa isn't as attracted to your grandma as she was when she was 20, right? Your 80-year-old grandpa probably would prefer if Granny had that 20-year-old smoking body back, right? But they can stay together because there's just a bond there, right? What about pedophiles? Let's say that we accept every argument you've made so far and say that it's not harmful, that there are certain situations where you can groom, let's just call it what it is, where you groom children into having sex with you. What happens when you don't like them anymore? What do you think happens to that child after you just say, not interested anymore, too old? If it wasn't psychologically harming before, oh, it is then. It's psychologically harming for adults to get rejected like that, to just be dumped out of the blue. Children aren't equipped to deal with that, especially not teenagers. Especially not young teenagers. Let's move on.
Harmful. And to expand on this assertion, I made a YouTube channel. Glad you could be here. That's how big of a topic it is.
I'm not exceptionally glad to be here, but somebody should talk about it.
So I won't say anything about it here. Instead, I'll bring up my next point as to why minor attraction isn't wrong. It's beneficial. That's right. The most despised thing in the world might actually be good for you.
Oh, God. At least before, you were following a train of logic. How in the fuck are you going to justify this?
Like broccoli to a 3-year-old. I'll point out here that most of the evidence I've found for this point is anecdotal, but that just means it's worth exploring.
Truly shocking. The evidence you found that fucking children is good is anecdotal.
Past, we've discovered some very beneficial things from what we've assumed is harmful, like tomatoes, which were thought to be poisonous due to their relation to the deadly nightshade plant, or penicillin hiding within mold. It is always in humanity's best interest to explore the potential benefits of harmful things.
We've already explored this. In some regions, pedophilia was accepted. In some regions, it was even encouraged. Historically speaking, we grew out of pedophilia. This isn't a problem of progress not taking us to it. It's an achievement of progress that took us away from it. We decided from a civilization that thought pedophilia was okay that it's no longer okay. This point is moot.
Within as close to lab conditions as possible. It's how our knowledge grows and how we move towards a brighter future. But back to the benefits. The research I found in this area is limited. I assume that's due to stigma and legality. What I've found is not specific to minor attraction, but it is strongly related. An article in Express newspapers pointed out an interesting correlation. Cultures in which physical affection is discouraged have higher violent crime rates. The study looked at 2 countries, France and the USA, and monitored how often physical affection was shown to children by parents in front of restaurants. The French averaged out to about 110 times in half an hour, whereas the parents from the USA averaged out to twice in the same time period.
Great, maybe I should find a French wife, because she'll probably do a good job taking care of the kids then. This isn't the same. Kissing your kid on the cheek, or giving them hugs, or, playing with them, that's not the same thing as shoving your cock in them. How is this hard to understand? This isn't even close to a one-to-one comparison. Parents loving on their kids is not the same. Good lord.
Rather than assume this accounted for the much higher violent crime rate in America, the researchers then proceeded to watch the interactions between children at playgrounds. They found that the American children were violent 34% of the time. It's about 1 in 3, which is significant, especially compared to the French 1 in 100.
Yes, children that have good parents tend to be less violent. That's a well-established fact. Parents that, love on their children and give them attention. Kids that have, a good, stable home life tend to be better behaved and do better in school and just in life in general. That's not an argument for pedophilia.
There may be no connection to the crime rates in those countries, but there is a strong correlation.
Oh no, there is a connection to the crime rates. I'll just put that out there right now. There is a connection to how parents treat their kids and crime rates. A very strong one. Not just a correlation. Still not an argument for pedophilia.
Considering that the violent crime rate in USA is at least 3 times that of France. Further, back in 1975, one James Prescott released an article in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists titled Body Pleasure and the Origins of Violence, which is odd considering the name of the publication. Still, it brings up some very good points. It's very large though, and 40 years old, so I'll have to condense the whole thing down. Basically, Prescott claimed, after much research into current and past civilizations, that sex negativity was in fact the cause of violent societies. Warlike nations were also known to consider sex to be taboo.
Why would you use the Romans as your example of a sex-negative society? Have you ever heard of a Roman bathhouse? The Romans weren't shy at all. At least not in the books I've read. The fall of the Roman Empire had nothing to do with, or even the violence of the Roman Empire had nothing to do with sex. It had everything to do with greed and desire for land.
with strict social standards on how to deal with it, whereas those nations that were more open and accepting of sexuality were also the most peaceful.
Really? Really? Buddhist monk children are your example, or maybe they're Tibetan. I'm not entirely sure. But that's one of the strictest that's one of the most sexually strict societies I've ever seen. Did you just have an example? Did you just want an example of a violent society and a peaceful one? Because you appear to have gotten their sexual opinions completely backwards.
This can still be seen today. Look at Europe compared to the USA, compared to the Middle East. The nations get progressively more sex negative and progressively more violent.
Yes. Islam is sex negative. Can I just point out they also have child brides? In the Middle East, child brides are not exceptionally uncommon. Pedophilia is accepted there in many ways. Not completely, but to an extent where you can marry a kid. So, that seems to fuck with your argument just a little bit.
There is some outdated science in there, so it's not infallible. However, I do believe it's made an accurate claim, which deserves further examination and confirmation, as the scientific method demands.
Are you ever going to explain how this relates to pedophilia? Because you haven't actually talked about anything that's pedophile. This is all sex negative and parenting arguments. This is not pedophilia yet. Maybe it gets to it.
Speaking of wonderful articles, I read a fantastic post on consenting humans recently, entitled Some Arguments for a Kinder World.
Wait. Who crossed that out? Was it you that crossed that out? Was it you that crossed that out? Please tell me it was you. Because I really hope. I'm gonna go ahead and believe in my heart that this isn't an article saying what you seem to be implying here with this image.
In it, the author details most eloquently some of the benefits of children's sexual rights, pedophilia, and pro-M.A.P society.
Fuck, it was the article itself that did that. Fuck. Well, this is gonna be dumb, isn't it?
I'll leave a link in the description box. I recommend you go and check it out. I won't recite the post here, but I will bring up one of the points I feel is important. M.A.P child relationships are the only situation in which a child has the power to opt out at will. This is important. Where else can children learn that they can choose their relationships for themselves? With other adults, they cannot get away, at least not without considerable effort.
No. Just, that doesn't work, even by your own logic. If we go back to the other chart you brought up, where the only situation where a child gets out of it with at least minimal scarring would be a sexually educated child who isn't aware of the taboos and is fully consenting in sex. But again, how do you get there? They don't just magically look up sex like, hey, how awesome is sex? That's not what, they don't put that into Google, you dingus. You have to teach them. You have to groom them. And in that process, you have to endear yourself to them. Or, yeah, you would have to. I just thought about it for a second. It's like, that's true, right? No, that would have to be true. Because again, you have to acquire consent for even the least bad scenario. Yeah? And now we're saying that they have the option to opt out. By this point, you would have become an important figure in their life. Assuming it goes on for any period of time, because their parents are apparently just nowhere to fucking be found and are totally cool with some 40-year-old man like you fucking their 6-year-old. Let's keep going.
How often have parents brought kids to a doctor that they clearly wanted to avoid?
Because the parents care about the, like, really, we're going with this image of a child scared in the corner of the mean old doctor. Really? They go to the doctor because they have to.
How often has a babysitter been kept around despite protests from the child because those protests didn't include serious issues?
Yeah, because someone still has to watch the kid.
And don't think kids have much respite at school. They're put into peer groups regardless of how they interact with each other. They're forced into play dates that they may not want to be a part of.
Because they know it's important. Like, what? This is just parenting. Weren't you just talking about the importance of, you know, being active in your kid's life, doing good parenting? You can't just let your kid do whatever the fuck they want. You're gonna end up with a fucked up kid.
They're even separated from their chosen friends for various reasons, usually against their will.
You mean because they think the kid's friends are a bad influence? Again, indicating, if not necessarily good parenting because they might be wrong, at least indicating that the parent cares. Which is incredibly important.
There's a degree of independence that is necessary for a M.A.P child relationship to flourish.
Yes, I agree. Another reason we shouldn't just let kids do whatever the fuck they want.
Most parents want to foster independence with their children for adulthood. However, they want to do so without giving up any power.
Power? Someone that wants to groom children wants to talk about how much power an adult has over this child's life. Really? How much power do you think that M.A.P, pedophile, has over that kid's life? How much influence do you think they have over how that kid feels, what they do? It's comparable. At least if that person stays in their life for any period of time. Probably, again, because the parents are just absentee, for all intents and purposes.
It happens begrudgingly, but it takes literal rebellion to wrest that control from them. There's something to be said for this, as rebelling could cause greater independence than learning it through social interactions. However, I think the negative effects for both parents and the child make the latter preferable.
You're arguing that rebellious teenagers are doing the correct thing. I guess in some situations that could be true, but somehow I don't think we're thinking about the same reasons.
So to sum up, minor attraction is at least harmless.
Wrong.
And potentially beneficial.
Wrong.
Because of this, it isn't immoral to be attracted to children.
Wrong.
Nor would M.A.P child relationships be. The only thing causing harm, and thus making it immoral, is the fact that it's considered immoral.
Wrong.
Damn circular reasoning. Why must you curse us so often?
Please stop making jokes.
Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, or it gave you cause to think, please click that like button. If you want to see more, why not subscribe? And if you have an issue with my argument, or you want to show your support, please comment below. Until next time, always remember, if you're lost in a sexual landscape, make sure you have a moral compass, and consult your M.A.P.
Oh, good lord. Well, I made a nice video for you. Let's see if you respond. I'd be interested to see what he responds with, if he does respond. I hope he does. Gives me a little more fodder. Jesus. I don't even know how to end this video. Although I am pretty new to this. That was dumb. That was real bad. I really hope this doesn't continue. I'm going to keep an eye out for this sort of thing, because I've been noticing other YouTubers start talking about it, and it seems like something that's growing, disturbingly. It's not a popular thing yet, I don't think. Let's try and keep it that way. After all, the best disinfectant is sunlight. And here comes the sun. Y'all have a great day.